So are you thinking that the dogs will go in there and won't find anything?
I know for 100% they won't find anything.
So what do you make of the fact that they are bringing the cadaver dogs in?
Well, I'm actually pretty happy about that because it's been about 3 months. I've been asking for them, and it's just been delayed, I guess, till now. But
6-year-old Lily Sullivan and her 4-year-old brother Jack vanished from their rural home in Lansdowne Station, Nova Scotia. But what began as a heartbreaking missing persons case has since been overshadowed by growing suspicion directed at one man, their stepfather, Daniel Martell. From the very beginning, whispers in the community turned into open accusations, with neighbors, online commentators, and even some extended family members asking whether he knew more than he was letting on. Martell himself has publicly insisted on his innocence, saying he volunteered for polygraph and drug testing to clear his name. But the shadow of doubt has lingered, making this case far more complex than a simple disappearance. The RCMP's investigation has only fueled speculation. Teams of officers, aided by volunteers, searched tirelessly through dense woods, rivers, and marshland in the days after the children went missing. Items believed to be connected to the children, most notably pieces of a pink blanket thought to belong to Lily, were recovered and sent for forensic testing. Still, no definitive answers emerged. And when the RCMP confirmed the cadaver dogs would be deployed in renewed searches, many felt it signaled investigators were preparing for the worst. For some, this development hardened their belief that foul play was involved, and that suspicion inevitably returned to those closest to the children. In communities like Lansdowne Station, where trust and familiarity usually run deep, the accusations against Martell have divided opinion. Some residents believe he has been unfairly singled out because of his role as a step-parent rather than a biological parent. Others, however, say it's impossible to ignore the tension, the unanswered questions, and the simple fact that children rarely vanish without someone noticing something. The ongoing investigation has magnified these divides, with every new piece of information, from the blanket evidence to reports of polygraph results, sparking fresh debates and heated discussions both in local circles and online. The disappearance of Lily and Jack has therefore become more than just a desperate search for two missing children. It's a case clouded by suspicion, accusations, and community fracture. While their mother pleads for answers and investigators continue their work, the spotlight remains firmly on Daniel Martell, a man caught between his claims of cooperation and the relentless doubts of community that wants someone to blame. The deeper this case goes, the more it feels like the truth lies tangled somewhere between grief, rumor, and evidence still waiting to be uncovered. Cadaver dogs and their expert handlers were flown in from British Columbia to assist the RCMP, marking one of the most significant escalations in the search for Lily and Jack Sullivan. These dogs are specially trained to detect the scent of human remains, even long after decomposition has begun, and their deployment signaled that investigators were no longer limiting their search to the hope of finding the children alive. For many, this shift felt like a grim turning point in the investigation, a quiet acknowledgement that foul play was strongly suspected. According to the children's stepfather, Daniel Martell, the teams methodically searched multiple high-priority areas, each chosen for its potential relevance to the case. The first was the so-called blanket site, located partway up Lansdowne Road, near a disused ATV trail. Here, investigators had previously recovered pieces of a pink blanket believed to belong to Lily, a discovery that had become one of the central pieces of physical evidence in the case. Cadaver dogs combed the area repeatedly, searching for any lingering scent that might confirm whether the children had been present, or worse, whether they had met harm there. Another focus was the pipeline area, where community members and some searchers reported finding what looked like boot prints, and possibly even barefoot tracks, leading into sections of rough terrain. Such impressions, fragile and easily lost to weather or traffic, can often be the difference between solving a case and leaving it in mystery. Cadaver dogs were walked along these trails multiple times, their handlers watching for even the smallest behavioral cue that might indicate human scent buried beneath the soil or carried in the wind. The most thorough searches, however, were carried out at the family property itself. This included not only the home and trailer, but also outbuildings, an RV, the chicken coop, vehicles parked on site, and the surrounding 2 acres of land. Every corner was inspected, every patch of Ground crossed more than once, as dogs circled back in overlapping sweeps to ensure nothing was missed. These weren't quick checks. Searches were conducted and then repeated over several days, demonstrating how seriously investigators treated the possibility that answers could lie right at the family's doorstep. For locals watching the operation unfold, the sheer scale of the cadaver dog deployment sent a chilling message. This was no longer just a missing person search. It was an exhaustive hunt for evidence, one that left many wondering if the truth about Lily and Jack's disappearance was far darker than anyone initially wanted to believe. Daniel has described a pivotal moment during the searches that continues to haunt him. He says that while cadaver dogs and their handlers were combing through the family's property and surrounding areas, one of the handlers stepped away from his task and confronted him directly. According to Daniel, the man placed a firm hand on his shoulder, looked him squarely in the eye, and said words that cut through him like a knife. "Daniel, 2 children just don't go missing." The statement wasn't framed as a question, nor was it softened with empathy. It was delivered as if it were a truth that Daniel himself was refusing to acknowledge. The handler then pressed further, suggesting that something had happened on the night of May 1st, just hours before the children were officially reported missing. The implication was clear. Investigators weren't convinced this was a case of children wandering off or being taken by chance. They believed the answer lay much closer to home, and the focus of that suspicion was squarely on Daniel. For him, it felt less like a search for Lily and Jack and more like an interrogation without walls, where every word he said, every look on his face, was measured against a narrative investigators were quietly building. Daniel insists he pushed back immediately. He told a handler, firmly and without hesitation, that nothing happened that night. No argument, no accident, no incident that could explain why Lily and Jack vanished. He has repeated this denial publicly, saying he had nothing to hide and nothing to fear because he knew he was telling the truth. Yet, the confrontation rattled him. To be directly accused while search teams and cadaver dogs circled the property only deepened the cloud of suspicion that had already begun to surround him, adding to the confusion. Daniel later claimed that investigators themselves had reassured him in private that they believed the children were still alive the following morning. This mixed messaging left him frustrated, accused on one hand of knowing more than he admitted, while on the other being told to hold on to hope that Lily and Jack had survived past that night. To Daniel, it felt like he was trapped in a tug-of-war between belief and doubt, where every reassurance was undercut by another insinuation. According to Daniel, what began as a tense exchange of the dog handlers quickly escalated into something far more disturbing. He says the conversation turned to the families with stove, a mundane fixture on the property that suddenly became the center of a chilling line of questioning. The handlers, he recalls, pressed him about the ashes found inside, wanting to know if it burned anything since May 2nd, the day the children were reported missing. Their tone, as Daniel describes it, carried the heavy implication that investigators were no longer simply searching for missing children. They were entertaining the possibility of a cover-up. One of the handlers went further, telling him outright that cadaver dogs are capable of detecting the scent of human remains even in ashes. The suggestion was horrifying, that Lily and Jack's bodies could have been destroyed in the stove, reduced to nothing more than charred fragments and residue. To Daniel, the accusation felt not only outrageous, but grotesque. It placed him in the position of having to deny something he says is beyond comprehension, the idea that he would burn the very children he helped raise. He pushed back forcefully. Daniel pointed out that it was summer in Nova Scotia, a time when people rarely used wood stoves. On top of that, a fire ban had been in place, making it unlikely that anyone would light a stove during that period. The ashes, he explained, were nothing unusual, just a remnants of earlier fires from cooler days, left there like in countless other rural homes. To him, this line of questioning ignored common sense and instead revealed how far suspicion had gone in, twisting ordinary details into sinister theories. Yet the moment lingered, even as Daniel insisted on his innocence. The fact that investigators were willing to consider such a horrific possibility showed how serious the accusations against him had become. Every ordinary object on the property, a blanket, a footprint, now a stove, was transformed into potential evidence. For Daniel, the confrontation over the ashes was more than an attack on his credibility. It was a sign that In the eyes of some, he had already been cast in the role of villain, whether or not the facts supported it. Daniel has since spoken about those confrontations with a mix of anger, exhaustion, and disbelief, summing up the experience as nothing short of heartbreaking and sickening. For him, being placed under the microscope while grieving the disappearance of Lily and Jack felt like an assault on his integrity, as though investigators were determined to twist his every action into evidence against him. The weight of such accusations, particularly when voiced so bluntly by the handlers, left him feeling cornered, as though the search for truth had become less about finding the children and more about pinning blame. What remains uncertain is whether these moments were the product of individual dog handlers stepping outside their professional boundaries, or if they reflected a larger, calculated strategy by investigators. In some cases, confrontation can be used deliberately, meant to provoke a reaction or shake loose inconsistencies in a suspect story. But in this instance, the line between formal questioning and personal accusation appears blurred. Were these confrontations coordinated under RCMP direction, or were they the spontaneous suspicions of handlers frustrated by the lack of progress? That ambiguity has only deepened the tension surrounding the case, leaving Daniel to insist that he is being unfairly targeted without concrete evidence. Yet, no matter the tactics, the central truth remains chilling. Lily and Jack are still missing. Months of searching, dozens of interviews, forensic testing of blankets and property, and even the deployment of cadaver dogs have not produced the answers that community members and families so desperately crave. Each unanswered question hangs heavily in the air, especially along that quiet stretch of Lansdowne Station where the children were last seen. The absence of clarity gnaws at both investigators and locals, because the idea that two young children could vanish in broad daylight without explanation is almost unthinkable. And so, the most haunting fact endures, beyond accusations, beyond theories, beyond the emotional toll on Daniel and the family. No one has been able to explain what really happened on that road, in that house, or on that night. Until Lily and Jack are found, every search, every confrontation, and every painful exchange will circle back to the same devastating void, a mystery that refuses to let go.